Welcome guys, we're doing a tier list update today. A couple of hours before I made my last tier list, a pretty large meta-defining patch was released, so many of the placements ended up being inaccurate, and since then I have ended up moving many things around. And I have to mention for any newcomers here, this tier list is Mythic Plus specific. I do not care about raid, I do not care about PvP, and it is made for mid to high level keys. In my opinion, that is 15 plus, so if you're playing keys under plus 15, this tier list does not apply to you, and most of these specs will be completely fine and very playable. So please don't go into my comments crying about meta elitism. And another thing that I wanted to mention is that I will not be making any more tier list videos until a very large patch comes out. I will still be updating it though. On my Discord, which you can find in the description, I have made a little tier list channel over here. For example, next reset already, some specs are getting some minor changes, so all of the updates will be here. And under the updated tier list, I will also be leaving a short description for every spec and my reasoning as to why I moved it where it is. Now that we finally have all of that clear, we probably don't want to be here for an hour, so instead of going over every single placement individually, let's just go over all of the specs that I have decided to move. Starting off with the tanks, we have two changes here. First of all, I have moved BDK from C tier up to Guardian. I think I ever so slightly undervalued it because it does provide some situational nice utility. The only unfortunate thing is that you are giving up the Frost / Unholy spot, but I think the same thing applies to Guardian, and I think that both of them are just similarly struggling, I guess. Next of all, maybe a bit of a controversial take, we'll see if people agree with this or not. I have decided to move Prot Warrior from A+ to S tier, all the way above VDH. I have honestly sort of realized that these two tanks are basically the same thing. They both provide a shit ton of mob control, they are pretty tanky. The only big problem is that VDH kind of does piss damage right now, and Prot Warrior is the highest damage tank in the game. Very quick recap for anyone who has missed this update. All of the dungeons got a buff to health and a nerf to damage, so high keys especially overall are much easier to live and much harder to time now. For that reason, tank damage is a lot more important than it was before. And since they do a very similar thing, have an offensive raid buff, and both of them are similarly tanky with the exception that Prot does a shit ton more damage, I think it is fair to put Prot at the top of S tier. Now let's go over all of the DPS which will make the majority of this tier list. First of all, I have moved Unholy from A tier all the way to A+. After like the 4 consecutive Frost nerfs, they perform very similarly now. The only reason why I am putting Frost ahead is because I think it is a bit more versatile in terms of group composition. It does do more physical damage, so it can be viable in physical comps as well, and also it profits a lot more from the melee attack part of Shaman's buff. So until any further balancing, I think Frost will keep having the edge for now. Next up, Assassination Rogue was moved from A tier all the way to S tier. I have heavily underestimated the buffs that this spec has gotten, and now the spec does so much damage that it is kind of broken. One of the most drastic changes that I made to the tier list is moving Subtlety Rogue all the way from C tier to A+ tier. Once again, because of misinformation, I thought that this spec got further nerfed, but it actually got buffed quite heavily. The only reason I am putting it in A+ tier instead of S tier is because it is quite a bursty spec and the funnel is also lower than Assassination, and for that reason I think in most keys you're gonna have more success with Assassination as opposed to sub. Next of all, I have moved BM Hunter from B tier to A+ tier. After we have seen all of the numbers, it does have a slight edge over the other hunters. Similarly to Survival, it also has super consistent damage, very good mass AoE, and overall I think it's gonna be very strong in physical comps. Next up, Devastation Evoker was also moved from B tier to A+ tier. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've made in the first tier list was underestimate the strength of Patters. At the end of the day, not every single spec needs to funnel, and the little shitter ads also need to die as well, which is the exact reason why you're gonna see me putting specs like Devastation up into the higher tiers. I have also slightly underestimated the utility of the spec. Similarly to Paladins, it does not bring anything offensive, but it does have some very nice defensive utility, which can be super useful, especially in hierarchies. So for that reason, I'm gonna keep it here. Next of all, the Warlocks were a bit of a mishmash all around the tier list, but I eventually decided to put all of them at the bottom of A+ tier. These also turned out to be absolutely massive pumpers, and the very cool thing about them is that all of them have their own specific niche or damage profile that they excel in. Destro has some bonkers uncapped AoE and also has a decent single target. For Affliction, the funnel feels amazing right now. After the prio buffs, I think it is an incredibly scary funnel spec now, and it is also pulling some great numbers in AoE as well. And Demonology is still a single target powerhouse. I see a lot of people putting Demo in A tier or maybe even B tier, which is a little bit bizarre to me because the spec definitely pumps and also brings the same utility as the other two. And although I do agree that both of the other lock specs do have a slight advantage in their own way, I don't really think it's fair to separate them by a tier, so I'm gonna keep it like this. And for the last DPS that has went up, I actually put Windwalker from C tier to the bottom of B tier. Honestly, I don't really think think it's fair to separate it from Mistweaver because they're basically the same. Both are quite undesirable even in physical comps because Rot Warrior and Brewmaster and Resto Druid and etc exist. So either both of them are going to be in the B tier or both of them in the C tier. That's basically up to you. You can make the headcanon for that, it doesn't matter. Now for all of the DPS that have been lowered, first of all I have separated Arms from Fury into the C tier. Fury has simply proven to be the superior warrior spec and Arms is lacking quite far behind. From what I have personally seen, I think the cleave is much better on Fury and single target is quite lacking on Arms. Don't get me wrong, the spec still might be preferable in some dungeons. Maybe Priory has some really big pulls where Fury is a bit worse and also a 2-target boss. But once again, similar situation to, for example, Sub and Assassination. I think you're gonna find bigger success in most keys with Fury. Next of all, I have lowered Outlaw from the bottom of A+ to the middle of the A tier. I feel like both Outlaw and BM Hunter are sort of filler physical specs. They don't provide a group buff, but they are basically there to do damage. And my two personal biggest problems with Outlaw is that first of all, the damage can be quite random, and second of all, the spec is capped, so you are gonna have to pull around it and play around it, unlike BM that is gonna do a lot better in AoE. And the last change that I have made to the DPS is move survival from A+ tier to A tier, right underneath marksmanship. I think damage-wise they are quite similar now. Maybe MM is a little bit easier to fit into a comp. It is ranged, and also with Dark Ranger you have a bit more prio damage and single target. The problem with survival is that I think historically it's really hard to comp around, it's really hard to fit somewhere, and for that reason I think MM is gonna perform better. Now that we have DPS out of the way, let's quickly go over the healers. We only have two changes here. I have decided to move both Preservation Evoker and Holy Paladin from B tier to A tier. Both of these are gonna be quite heavily overshadowed by the three healers up here. They are very situational, they only provide defensive group buffs, but they did end up being comparatively quite a bit better to Mistweaver, and Preservation also does some bonkers damage, by the way. And for the last change to the tier list, I have decided to dethrone Discipline from S tier to A+ tier. It is definitely not as necessary as last season. It does perform a bit worse in healing checks than both of these other two. I still think that it is very powerful, it's just a bit less super necessary now. This will still be incredibly useful, especially in comps where 1 or maybe even 2 DPS have a bit of a problem surviving. So yeah, I think all three of these healers are super strong and largely just depend on the comp that you are playing. So yeah, that is all of the changes that I have made. Once again, I will only be making tier list update videos from now on when a very large patch drops, but I will be updating it on my Discord every single time any sort of balancing happens. So if you want to keep track of the most current tier list from me, once again, hop on my Discord. We have a tier list channel right here. I am going to be including the updated tier list along with the date and also a detailed description of all of the changes on all of the placements. So yeah guys, if you want to talk about any of these specs or if you disagree with any of the placements, please tell me in the comment section. And now that we have this done, I can go back to grinding season 3 for 8 hours a day. See you guys on Twitch. Bye bye.